Hi everyone, it's Andrea Boweya. I can relate. It's been an incredibly intense week of intense emotions, grief in my own space and in my own heart and in the lives of those that I'm called to serve. It is hard not to experience the deep level of trauma that has been triggered on so many levels for all of us. As a world experienced the death of Mr. George Floyd, and sometimes all of us find it incredibly difficult to find our own way in the midst of the insurmountable. I wanted to talk with you today about bringing it home, proverbially speaking. I remember several years ago I was called as one of the speakers at a conference in the nation's capital, and the focus of the conference at that time was breaking the silence, looking at the impact, the insurmountable, the traumatic impact of rape as a weapon of war in African nations. As the conference started, there was a video that was shown at that conference, and it really just depicted in such a real way the act of violation on a woman and the emasculation of the man in her life. I remember going up to speak after several speakers would have shared the statistics and the grave data as to this, the reality of this history of trauma. And in my call to be the voice to the seeming voiceless, in my call to hear far beyond what is being said, as I went up to speak, it was hard not to feel the level of hopelessness in that room. I could hear the inaudible voices saying, what could I do? What could I do? Even if I could go to Africa, where would I go? Where would I start? Who would I connect with? What could I do? Because in our humanity, there is an activated part of us that want to be involved in the change that is needed and the change that is necessary. And so as I went up to speak, I had a prepared speech. But I decided, rightfully so, to pay attention to the people in the room and the experience in the here and now. I acknowledged the level of hopelessness that was in the room, here and now. And what I encourage everyone in that conference room to do in that moment, I say, I could imagine that there's a question in your mind right now. What could I do? If I were to go to Africa, where would I start? I want you to take a look, turn right now and look at the person to your left. And I want you to imagine that maybe in that person's life, the silence has not yet been broken. Maybe in that person's sister or brother or neighbor's life, the silence has not been broken. I want you to just look into yourself and to see how the silence in your own life have not been broken, because there might not have been the opportunity that you've needed. Safe opportunity needed to break the silence. I want you to feel empowered there, that you can do something even in this very moment by your acknowledgement to break the silence in your own life. By creating a space for that sister in your own home that you might not have even known. How many individuals come to the rooms of counseling or the trusted friend after years and years and say, I've never told anyone. In most of our lives, the feeling of hopelessness prevails on and on when there is a lack of safe space to break the silence. Several years ago, God Himself laid on my heart to start an action, a dialogue to action gathering called the Restoration of Fatherhood. As I meet with individuals in the opportunities that God has given me to speak to large gatherings, I would often say I need to find another way to express this passion in my heart. I would say to them, I love men. And depending on the ear that falls on, it might not sound the way that I intended for it to sound. But God has somehow, as a woman, given me a passion, a heart for the heart of men. And I believe that most of us can't deny that as we felt the trauma revisited in our own life and the search of our heart to break the silence and to give a voice to that thing, that experience, that insurmountable, it's seemingly invisible that has lacked a voice for so long. It is hard for us to not admit that that reality has been ever more so intense when we think about the Black men in our lives. As I was growing up, no one ever sat me down and told me, as you grow up, I want you to know that you can make it on your own. You don't need a man. You don't need a man. You can do your own work. You can provide for yourself. You don't need a man. No one ever sat me down and told me that. But in the culture, it was reverberated in so many different ways. The devaluing of who he is. That being said, I do not for 1 second believe that that devaluing of the men in our lives has been intentional. I believe that for the most part, it has been unwitting. It has been unwitting. It has been the automatic download of culture and the impact of culture, the impact of unhealed cultural wounds, the impact of trauma unhealed, the silent voice of trauma in most of our lives as women. I wanted to talk to you today about bringing this home. What can I do right where you are? In your own home, just like I encouraged those attendees at that conference several years ago. You might not be able to go to the exact place of the incidents of this week, the traumatic incident, but you could for sure, I'm certain, acknowledge how this has impacted your own heart, how this potentially has impacted your children. Absolutely, as wives, how this has caused the husbands in our lives to revisit the dehumanization of who they are culturally, systemically, and the devaluing that they have oftentimes faced and experienced unwittingly, albeit in our own homes. I want to encourage you to do what you can, where you are, what you can, to create increasing opportunities intentionally to allow the men in your life to breathe. I know. Even the power of breathing that keeps us alive, that word has now become a trigger. And we could hold both ends at the same time, that we can turn the trigger now into a force of life. Allow him to breathe. I recently had an experience with my husband where I had it was in the midst of this trauma revisited moment, and my heart was heavy, and he was asking me to do something for him, and I said to him, I don't have a clue how I would do that. And then I heard the voice in my head, let him breathe. He was asking for my support in that moment for something very crucial. And my lending my support to him was one way, practically in that moment, that I could allow him to breathe. It changed my response in that here and now radically. So I'm going to go through the letters of that very word that has been a trigger for most of us, and part of the healing of trauma is to be able to find the strengths while not minimizing the pain, but using the strength of that moment, the empowerment within yourself, as the leverage for the change that we all desire. And if we make that leveraging doable right where you are, it changes the scope in a significant way. Particularly wives of Black men, the women that are in relationship with them. Believe in him. For many of the men in our lives, there are women that I've heard from that you can't see the potential, because his capacity as he's living it right now, it just doesn't show me the potential. I want you to believe in him. Believe in the seed that you can see. If we were to even use a sexual analogy here, as a woman, it is important when you are called to be the helpmeet as a wife to him, the friend to him, the one in relationship with him, to be able to see that seed without being able to see it with your eyes, discernibly see it. And be willing to receive that seed. Be willing to incubate that seed. Be willing to carry that seed in expectancy to life. As a woman, you are not the mother, but you certainly are the one who's been empowered to support him in rewriting the negative, maladaptive, dysfunctional narrative of his past in his interaction with womanhood. 2 years ago, I wrote a book out of the heart of God called The Heart of a Good Thing, Beyond the Destructive Patterns of the Past. This is it. Instead of devaluing him, see the seed in him and be willing to participate by discernibly seeing that seed, being willing to receive that seed. Without you, he cannot manifest. He needs you to carry the seed in him to life. R, respect him. The heart of every man craves to be respected. Respect him. Respect him for the small. Small things are really big deal. Respect him for the small. How do you show that you respect him? By celebrating and affirming the belief that you have in him, the belief that God has created him, that God has created him in his own image, that he is a man of honor far beyond what the eye can see. Respect him. Respect him as God's creation. Respect him. If in reality you can't see anything, if you're one of those women that say, I don't have anything to pinpoint why he deserves respect, respect him because you know he needs it. Respect is like breath to a man. Respect him because you know he needs it. E, be an evangelist. To evangelize means that we are able to communicate the heart of who we are and our belief in such a way that it is so attractive to the other that they want to come into now that purity, that wealth of belief. Evangelize to him. Affirm him. Be a teacher. Be a teacher. Not from a place of pride, but from a place of supporting him to support you, to support generations to come. H, hold him. Be his rib. The rib is rightfully placed beneath the heart, and for most men, that heart has been shut down. He needs to be held. Hold him. Hold him. And E, let us evolve radically together in the celebration of our men, in being bold, not just to speak words of kindness to them out there, but to action those words right in our home. One woman at a time. One man at a time. The restoration of manhood, the restoration that all of our hearts are crying out for. I believe it is possible. In the healing of a young boy in the Gospels, the Bible says, to him who believes, nothing shall be impossible. I believe. Would you join me? Bring it home and celebrate boldly the man, the boys in your life. God bless you.